The moment Lily pointed her tiny finger at the woman in the coffee shop, James felt his world shift. His 5-year-old daughter had never shown interest in any woman since her mother's passing, yet here she was, loudly announcing to everyone within earshot, "Dad, marry her." The stranger's coffee cup froze midway to her lips, her eyes widening as they locked with James. Neither could have possibly known that this embarrassing moment would change their lives forever. If you're touched by this story already, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more heartwarming real-life stories that remind us how unexpected moments can lead to beautiful beginnings. James Parker never planned on being a single father. At 32, he had imagined a different life, one where his wife Emma hadn't been taken by cancer 3 years ago, leaving him alone to raise their daughter. Every morning since then had been a careful balancing act of grief, responsibility, and trying to create some semblance of normalcy for Lily. Their Saturday morning ritual was sacred: breakfast at home, followed by a trip to Cornerstone Books and Coffee where James would sip his Americano while Lily colored at their regular table by the window. The bookstore cafe had become their sanctuary, a place where the weight on James' shoulders seemed lighter, if only for an hour. "Daddy, can I have another hot chocolate?" Lily asked, her coloring book momentarily forgotten as she looked up at him with Emma's eyes, the same warm brown that still haunted his dreams. "Half a cup," James conceded with a smile. "And then we need to pick up groceries before heading home." As he approached the counter to place their order, the bell above the door chimed. James barely noticed the woman who entered, tall, with auburn hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders, but Lily certainly did. Her gasp was audible even from across the room. "What is it, sweetheart?" James asked when he returned to their table, concerned by the way Lily was staring, transfixed, at the newcomer who now stood in line. Without warning, Lily stood on her chair, pointed directly at the woman, and declared in that piercing voice only children seem capable of producing, "Dad, marry her." The cafe fell silent. James felt heat rush to his face as several patrons turned to look, amused expressions on their faces. The woman, who he could now see was roughly his age, dressed in a simple green sweater and jeans, had turned toward them, her expression a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. "Lily!" James whispered urgently, gently pulling her arm down. "We don't point at people, and we definitely don't say things like that to strangers." "But Daddy," Lily insisted, her voice still carrying across the quiet cafe, "she looks like the princess from my book. And you're sad all the time. Princesses make people happy." If the floor could have opened up and swallowed him whole, James would have gratefully disappeared. Instead, he mumbled apologies to the surrounding tables and tried to focus on his daughter. "I'm not sad all the time," he said softly, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. To his surprise, a shadow fell across their table. The woman stood there, coffee in hand, a tentative smile on her face. "Your daughter has excellent taste in princesses," she said, her voice warm with a hint of laughter. "Though I'm afraid the only kingdom I rule is the third-grade classroom at Westfield Elementary." James looked up, meeting her gaze properly for the first time. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, kind eyes, with laugh lines at the corners. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, running a hand through his hair. "She's going through a matchmaking phase, apparently." "I'm Lily," his daughter announced proudly, extending her small hand as James had taught her. "I'm 5 3/4. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily," the woman replied, solemnly shaking the offered hand. "I'm Charlotte. I'm 31 and, let's say a half. Would you like to sit with us?" Lily asked, already clearing a space at their small table by pushing her coloring books aside. "Daddy's getting me hot chocolate." Before James could intervene, Charlotte glanced at him with a questioning look. He found himself nodding, surprising even himself. "I'd like that," Charlotte said, pulling out the chair across from him. "If your dad doesn't mind." That first conversation flowed with unexpected ease. Charlotte was new to town, having moved from Boston to take the teaching position. She loved books, evidenced by the well-worn copy of Jane Eyre she carried, and had a laugh that somehow made the cafe feel warmer. When they finally parted ways an hour later, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a lightness in his chest, the faint stirring of possibility. "See, Daddy?" Lily said as they walked to the car. "She made you smile the real smile." James didn't know then that Charlotte would become a regular fixture in their Saturday mornings. He couldn't have predicted how she would bring children's books she thought Lily might enjoy, or how she would remember that he preferred his Americano with an extra shot when the days grew shorter and colder. He certainly couldn't have imagined that 3 months later, when Lily came down with a severe case of strep throat and had to be hospitalized overnight, Charlotte would be the one he called in a panic, or that she would arrive at the hospital with Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit that had been left at the cafe earlier that day. "You didn't have to come," James said, his voice rough from worry as they stood in the hallway outside Lily's room where she had finally fallen asleep. "Yes, I did," Charlotte replied simply, her hand fine. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, James and Charlotte sat on the porch swing, a comfortable silence between them as they watched the stars appear one by one. "I need to tell you something," James said finally, his voice quiet in the darkness. Charlotte turned to him, her expression open but guarded. "Okay. Emma and I used to sit out here on summer nights," he began, feeling Charlotte tense slightly beside him. She loved the stars. Said they made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. He paused, gathering his courage. "For a long time after she died, I couldn't sit out here. It hurt too much. But tonight, sitting here with you, it feels right. And I know, Emma would be happy about that." Charlotte's eyes glistened in the porch light. "James. I'm not explaining this well," he continued. "What I'm trying to say is that I'm falling in love with you, Charlotte. And it doesn't feel like I'm betraying her memory anymore. It feels like honoring her by living again." The kiss they shared was gentle, a promise of more to come. Neither rushed, both understanding the precious fragility of what was growing between them. Their relationship wasn't without challenges. There was the time Lily had a meltdown when Charlotte suggested rearranging the living room furniture, screaming that Charlotte was trying to make them forget Mommy. There were the awkward introductions to James' in-laws, who struggled to accept Charlotte's presence in their granddaughter's life. There was the night James woke up calling Emma's name, only to find Charlotte beside him, patient and understanding. But there were beautiful moments too. Charlotte helping Lily create a memory box for the things that reminded her of her mother. James and Charlotte taking Lily to the zoo, where a photographer captured them laughing together, the first family photo James had allowed since Emma's death. The afternoon Charlotte received tenure at her school, and James and Lily surprised her with a homemade cake and banner. A year after their first meeting, James found himself back at Cornerstone Books and Coffee, this time without Lily. He'd asked his sister to watch her for the afternoon, claiming he had errands to run. In reality, he was meeting with the owner of the cafe, an older woman named Margaret who had witnessed that first embarrassing encounter. "So you're finally going to do it," Margaret said, her eyes twinkling as she handed him a small velvet box. "About time, if you ask me." "Thank you for holding on to this," James replied, opening the box to reveal the vintage emerald ring he'd purchased weeks ago, chosen to match Charlotte's eyes. "And for helping with the arrangements. That child of yours knew what she was doing," Margaret chuckled. "Smartest matchmaker I've ever seen." The following Saturday, Charlotte arrived at the cafe expecting their usual morning together. Instead, she found the place transformed. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling, and the tables had been pushed aside to create an open space in the center. In that space stood James and Lily, both dressed in their best clothes. "What's happening?" Charlotte asked, her voice catching as she took in the scene. Lily bounced forward, unable to contain her excitement. "Daddy has a question." James stepped forward, taking Charlotte's hands in his. Behind them, the regular Saturday patrons watched with knowing smiles, many had been there that first day and had witnessed their story unfold week by week. "Charlotte," James began, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "A year ago, my very wise daughter pointed you out in this cafe and made the most embarrassing and most perfect suggestion of my life." Charlotte laughed, tears already forming in her eyes. "You came into our lives when we were still healing, and instead of trying to fix us, you just loved us through it. You've created a space in our hearts that's entirely your own." James dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "So I was hoping you might consider making Lily's suggestion official." He opened the ring box, revealing the emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "Charlotte Bennett, will you marry me?" The cafe held its collective breath as Charlotte looked from James to Lily, who was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Please say yes," Lily stage whispered, causing laughter to ripple through the onlookers. "Yes," Charlotte said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." As James slipped the ring onto her finger, Lily launched herself at both of them, creating a group hug that nearly toppled James over. The cafe erupted in applause and cheers. Margaret appeared with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Lily, raising a toast to the newly engaged couple. "To the power of children's intuition," she said with a wink at Lily, "and to second chances at happiness." Later, as they celebrated with their closest friends and family, James found a moment alone with his daughter. "Are you happy, Lilybug?" he asked, kneeling to her level. Lily nodded solemnly. "Charlotte makes you smile the real smile," she repeated, the same words she'd said a year ago. Then she added, "And Mommy is smiling too, from heaven." James pulled her into a tight hug, his heart full. "How did you get so smart?" "I'm a Parker," she replied with the confidence only a 6-year-old could muster. "We know things." The wedding took place the following spring in the garden of the small house they had purchased together, a fresh start that still had room for memories. Lily served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her responsibilities with utmost seriousness until the moment she spotted a butterfly and momentarily abandoned her post to chase it, causing the assembled guests to laugh. Charlotte wore a simple ivory dress with emerald earrings that matched her engagement ring. James couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him, his future approaching with each step. In a touching moment that left few dry eyes, they included a special remembrance for Emma during the ceremony. Lily placed a single white rose on an empty chair in the front row, and James acknowledged the love that had come before, thanking Emma for the gift of their daughter and the capacity to love again. When it came time for the vows, Charlotte surprised everyone by kneeling down to address Lily first. "Lily Parker," she said, her voice clear despite her tears, "I want you to know that I am not trying to replace your mother. She will always be your mom, and she will always be in your heart. But I promise to love you as my own, to support your dreams, to read you stories, and to be there for every skinned knee and every triumph. I promise to keep her memory alive for you, and to be the best bonus mom I can be." Lily, dressed in her pale yellow dress with flowers in her hair, threw her arms around Charlotte's neck. "I love you, Charmom," she whispered, the nickname she had created weeks earlier when trying to figure out what to call her new stepmother. When Charlotte rose to face James, there wasn't a single person present who didn't feel the power of the moment, a family being formed not out of obligation or convention, but out of choice and love. "I take you, James, not just as my husband, but as my partner in this beautiful, blended family we're creating," Charlotte said. "I promise to respect the past that shaped you, to cherish the present we share, and to look forward to the future we'll build together." James' vows were equally moving. "Charlotte, you taught me that the heart doesn't have limited space for love, it expands. I promise to continue growing with you, to face whatever challenges come our way as a team, and to never take for granted the second chance at happiness you've given us." As they were pronounced husband and wife, Lily cheered louder than anyone, jumping up and down in her excitement. The photograph captured in that moment, James and Charlotte laughing as Lily celebrated between them, would hang in their home for years to come, a testament to the joy that can follow pain. The reception was held at Cornerstone Books and Coffee, transformed for the evening into an enchanted garden that matched the one at their home. Margaret, who had become something of a fairy godmother to their relationship, presented them with a special gift, a leather-bound album containing photographs of their Saturday mornings at the cafe, beginning with a surreptitiously taken picture of that very first encounter. "I had a feeling about you too," she admitted with a wink. Call it an old woman's intuition. Life after the wedding settled into a new rhythm. They faced challenges, of course. The first time Charlotte had to discipline Lily and worried she had overstepped, the day James found himself comparing Charlotte to Emma and felt guilty for days, the difficult conversations with Emma's parents who struggled to accept their son-in-law's new marriage. But there were countless moments of joy too. Charlotte's discovery that she was pregnant 6 months after the wedding, and Lily's ecstatic reaction to the news that she would be a big sister. The day they painted the nursery together, all three of them ending up with more paint on themselves than on the walls. The quiet evenings when James would find Charlotte and Lily looking through Emma's old photo albums, keeping her memory alive even as they created new memories of their own. When Thomas James Parker was born on a snowy December morning, Lily was the first visitor allowed into the hospital room. She approached the tiny bundle in Charlotte's arms with awe, gently touching her brother's tiny fingers. "He's so small," she whispered. "You were this small once too," James told her, his arm around her shoulders. "Can I tell him about Mommy Emma?" Lily asked, looking up at Charlotte with uncertainty. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Of course you